So you need the tools, you need the data to understand the behavior. 99.9% of a consumer's problem, someone else has already had. The numbers don't lie, right? So customer acquisition is much more expensive than customer retention.
Hi everybody, for today's episode of Retention Zone, the video podcast focused on streaming media monetization, I have the pleasure to have with me Colin Morrison, which has kind of a long experience in streaming, I would say, and media in general. Hi Colin.
Good morning, Carlo. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, you could say I've got a long experience in streaming, and in fact, in the media entertainment industry as a whole, I started out in 1986, if you can believe it, at my first IBC.
1 year before me. Someone that started 1 year before me.
It's not often I meet people who've been in the industry longer than me these days, but it used to be in Brighton before we moved to Amsterdam, and I've been to NAB when it was still rotating around multiple cities. So I've seen a lot of changes in technology. I've seen a lot of changes in business models. But fundamentally, the industry's the same, right? The content is created, it's stored, it's delivered, it's consumed, and then somewhere along the line, people try and make money out of the business. So
exactly, somehow.
Kind of like, those basics remain true throughout. So that's good. Yes, streaming. So my first experience of streaming was way back in 1998. When I joined a company called Silicon Graphics, famous for supercomputers, doing special effects for Jurassic Park and those kind of things. And there was a software division who built an MPEG-1 streaming server, and they had partnered with the Dutch broadcaster, NOS, and KPN, the Dutch telco, to run a 1,500 subscriber or user trial of MPEG-1 video streaming to a web browser on a PC device. Wow. And it was done over ADSL, and it was 1.5 megabits per second, MPEG-1 transport stream delivery. And it was all about learning how subscribers interact with an electronic device to consume content interactively. So there are all sorts of things that had to be made to work, not least of which was the ADSL infrastructure, the video streaming server, the compression needed to be sorted out, and the user experience was paramount, because if the subscribers weren't interacting with the tool because it was difficult to use, then it would fail all around. You get the greatest technology, but it's the user experience was absolutely key. And interestingly enough, a lot of elements that you see today in smart televisions and UIs on devices are very similar to what was actually being trialed way back 26 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And I go to dinner parties and people say, "Hey, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I'm working in software on interactive television." And people stare at me like I was mad. So so of course everybody knows about it today. So that was really my first touch of streaming media.
And I like that you started by mentioning user experience. I don't want to say divide, but I organize user experience at the beginning as the discovery of the video, the content you want to consume, and the consumption of it. And then I don't know how you want to call everything around it. I call it customer experience. So I think that's part of how people get on board and then stay and pay for staying and consuming, I think. What's your view on that?
Oh, completely. At the end of the day, if you're asking people to pay for a service, it has to be usable. Right? And if it's difficult, if it's challenging, we're both technologists. We've been in this space a long time. Even I struggle sometimes to get an app working on a smart TV or across multiple devices, or understand the subscription page of the customer care thing. It's a trial, and it's that thing that can become very frustrating, which would lead people to say, it's just not worth it. The content may be interesting to me, but I'm not going to spend my quality time struggling with the technology to get something I want to watch. So that's something that's end to end has to work, and has to work seamlessly. And if there is a problem, someone needs to be able to be helped quickly, easily, through whatever tools are available. Ultimately, calling customer care if necessary to help you get that user experience that you're paying for. So I think that it's absolutely paramount. It's critical to the success of any business. If you're upsetting your clients, they're going to walk. There are alternatives. They will go elsewhere. Unless you've got an exclusive deal on something, then and even then you'll still lose people because it's too frustrating.
And because some, in theory, so I want to hear your opinion. In theory, we should be almost there, because now we have been through some years, some cycle, and we very often, I started using the word frictionless many years ago, but that was the idea. Where do you think we are today?
So there's two aspects to that. One's the technical aspect, and I agree with you. I think today people are very savvy with devices. They're very used to dealing with apps. They're very used to installing things, uninstalling things. So I think from a technology perspective, from a consumer to get something set up and working, it's fine. I think that there's obviously occasionally bugs and glitches, but we're almost there. From a business perspective, I'm not so sure. I think having to navigate your way through multiple apps, multiple service delivery platforms to find what you're looking for is still a huge challenge that the industry as a whole needs to sort out. But if you think back to the days of cable and interactive TV services, the idea of aggregating channels together. So you have one UI and you've got all the TV channels in the world, or you've got one service for video on demand, and they will go and find the content you want to put in there. Now, of course, you've got more streaming services that I can count. They've all got their own business models. If you add it all up, it's very expensive. Moving from one app to another app means typically coming out, going to a different app, looking in that app. So this idea of super aggregation, I think, is very important and still needs to be really sorted out as an industry as a whole. It's all very well streamers doing merger and acquisitions and coming together and bundling their content.
Every week there is breaking news.
The drive for profits is driving that activity, which again, completely understandable. It's not a charity. These companies need to make money. They're investing billions in content. They've got to make a profit. It is a business. But I think there are still things that can be done. The ability for streamers, even if you still need to pay to watch a particular piece of content, why should it mean that you have to enter into that subscription app in order to consume that content? There was an interesting company that launched just before COVID called Strum, S-T-U-U-M, I believe. Silicon Valley, an ex-Disney exec set it up. And they had this concept of you paid them, and you in effect you got credits, and then they would negotiate and aggregate content across multiple streaming services. So you had one interface, you had one pay portal, and then you would just use your credits to watch a piece of content. And it didn't matter which streaming service that content resided on. You didn't have to go and find that streaming service. You didn't have to subscribe to that streaming service. You just describe the Strum. And then Strum would share the revenue for that credit for the content rights owner.
Kind of a Spotify model in music.
Yeah, exactly.
With the majors, with the labels, somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes so much sense from a subscriber perspective, but we're nowhere near that yet with the video streaming model. People are still figuring out, can they make a profit on their own? Netflix is just about doing it, but it's not where you think, wow, this is booming business. They'd only need a couple of bad years and boom, they'll be back in the bed again. So it's
they seem to be kind of resisting, leading, winning somehow, I would say. Netflix, with all the problems, they reacted well. They introduced I think
had the first mover advantage. Leading. There's no question about that. They created this space in effect. SVOD. They pushed through. They invested very, very heavily where it mattered, which is great. So I think that they've made the market to a certain extent, but now we've got to move forward into the next level of that, where content can be discovered and consumed from one portal. And you don't need to as a subscriber, have to figure out which streaming service I can find the content I'm interested in watching. And that involves technology as well, right? So having consistent metadata across all of these platforms, so the metadata can be shared for subscriber to search against. Recommendations engines need to be able to look into these different apps to know where that content is in order to recommend it to you. If I'm using natural language voice search capabilities, you need to be able to speak to your device and say, hey, I'd like to watch the Tom Hanks movie with he had that volleyball on the beach, Castaway. If you don't use the word Castaway, but you describe what you want to watch, the metadata needs to be rich enough to describe that content. The aggregation service needs to know where that content is located, and it then needs to be presented to you so you can consume it. It may be that today you'd have to subscribe to a different service to get it, but at least you'd be able to know where it is. So I think all of these elements are there, but it's a business decision. It's a commercial modeling in order to make it all really work together. And I think that's really the next phase.
And maybe because of what you're saying now, what you said until now, churn is one of the, I always call it the scary monster, right? So I think it is clear more and more that not only you need, if you're launching or if you have an existing streaming service, you need obviously to acquire constantly new customers, but it's so much more important this time to retain customers. Do you think there is what's your strategy for that, if you want?
Yeah, I think the numbers don't lie, right? So customer acquisition is much more expensive than customer retention. The time to acquire new clients, set them up, etc. It's prohibitively expensive for some companies. And then you've got the amount of actual physical time an individual subscriber has to actually consume content. At a certain amount of minutes, that's it. You don't have more minutes in the day. You don't have more devices to watch at the same time. So I think it's you've got to make sure that you're providing the stuff that these consumers want. So you need to be always ahead of the curve in terms of understanding your client base, providing them with an excellent service technically. So it's as you said, frictionless. So they're not thinking, oh God, I'd love to watch that, but it's just a pain in order to be able to see it. So that's all got to be taken care of completely, and it's got to be affordable. At a certain point, you get to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 streaming services. You think, well, it's a little bit too expensive, especially when the macroeconomic situation isn't great. People are having to think about where they use their money. So you've got to be sure that they're choosing to use money on your side of things, which means everything needs to be worthwhile. They have to have value for the money.
Yeah, it's a value exchange, no?
Sorry?
And it's kind of a value exchange that has to be sustainable for both ends in the end.
Completely, yeah. It's you can't undervalue the content to the point where no one's making a profit. If you're not making profit, then the businesses aren't going to do it.
And one angle that I like at some point, you said the trust. So I'm paying someone subscription or in other ways, but there is a level of trust that is in the relationship. So it's, as you said, the plans pages where I select which one. So the clarity, the transparency, the way you deal with me, I think it's becoming what makes me hate my provider, even if I still want to see the content. But that's that breaking point. As the content goes a bit down, the value goes a bit down. Say, whoa, I want to leave, right?
Yeah, and I feel that there's, we all know it's easy to subscribe to something. It's the devil's own job to unsubscribe from something. So and customer care is one of those elements. What's the saying? If you really love somebody, let them go. It'll be free.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's true across the whole experience. And being aware of how your customers are feeling, like you said just now. You're getting to the point where there's a tipping point where it suddenly becomes a little bit painful, then it becomes very painful, then you've had enough. At the start of that journey, the service provider needs to have a way of understanding that subscriber is on that journey.
Something is happening.
Good.
Something is happening.
So you need the tools, you need the data to understand the behavior. And there are all sorts of really smart machine learning algorithms out there. I remember at least 5 years ago, we were working with Sky on the early days of their Sky Q voice experience and analyzing the anonymized data to make actionable choices and decisions for the service provider, because certain behavior, people are, they get comfortable with using stuff and they behave in a certain way. Once they change that behavior, something's changed. It could be positive or it could be negative. And if it's negative, you need to know about it and you need to flag it. And then your customer care team needs to make some smart choices about what they do with that subscriber. And it may be a simple thing about just calling them out, offering them something for free, or changing the bundle model for them. And if it's across the board, then you've got some macro issues to deal with. It could be technology, streaming platforms not doing its job properly, or whatever. So I think having that user data is so important for churn prevention and retention as a whole.
And one last thing on customer care. You said at the beginning, and I think it's also the normal way you say, "Oh, I need to call customer care." It's possibly one of the least pleasure I have in my life. It's calling customer. I mean, physically calling.
It's a thing of last resort.
I'm getting more and more used, and because I think finally they are at a level where it's usable with, I would say, AI automated. So I go there, I write something. It's becoming very useful, or chatbot. So
totally.
What do you think?
99.9% of a consumer's problem, someone else has already had. So the customer care service department knows what the answer is, knows what the response is. And having a usable chatbot, something that's just not asking simple questions, but actually understands the request of the subscriber, it's got access to the database, they know what the answer is, and they can present the solution in a way that's understandable for the subscriber as well.
I was saying it can also be multilingual quite easily, I would say, today with AI.
Oh, well, I think that's an element of customer success and customer service. You've got to work in a language that your consumer understands. And it could be language, it could be vernacular, terminology. Don't use over technical terms, something that someone who's just a consumer must be able to understand. And I think that's super important.
So I love the passion starting from 1986 for this industry.
Oh, I love it. I almost retired twice in the last few years and I'm still here.
Well, man, and we're so happy to have you. Thank you, Colin, for the chat.
My pleasure.
Very, very inspiring. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Ciao.